If you've ever walked into an animal shelter, you know the sound. Dogs barking, kennels rattling, excited tails thumping against metal doors. The noise hits you immediately. It echoes through the hallways, bouncing off the walls, layered, constant, impossible to ignore. Some dogs bark out of excitement, some out of stress, some just to be noticed. The noise never really stops. It becomes part of the air, part of the atmosphere. But in one shelter kennel, something strange was happening. There was one dog who never barked. Not once. Not when visitors walked past. Not when other dogs barked beside him. Not even during feeding time. While everything around him was loud, he stayed completely still, completely silent. And the longer he stayed that way, the more noticeable it became. Because in a place filled with noise, silence stands out. Eventually, the staff started asking a question. Why was he so quiet? What could make a dog choose silence in a place where every other dog was trying so hard to be heard? The loud shelter. Animal shelters are full of energy. It's not a quiet place. It's movement, sound, and emotion all at once. Some dogs jump against their kennel doors, paws hitting the metal over and over. Others bark non-stop, their voices rising above the noise, hoping someone will notice them. Some spin in circles, some press their faces through the bars, some wag their tails so hard it echoes down the hallway. For many dogs, barking is their way of saying one thing. Pick me, see me, take me home. In a place where attention means everything, being loud can feel like the only way to be seen. But this dog didn't try to compete with the noise. He didn't jump, he didn't bark. He simply watched, quiet, still, as if he was waiting for something different. The quiet one. In the middle of all that chaos sat one quiet dog, not hidden, not tucked away, just there, medium-sized, brown and white fur. Nothing about him that immediately stood out in a crowded shelter. But if you looked a little closer, you'd notice his eyes, bright, focused. Following every person who walked past his kennel, he noticed everything, every movement, every voice, every pause in the hallway. But he never made a sound. No barking, no whining, not even a soft attempt to get attention. While other dogs pushed forward, trying to be seen, he stayed still. Visitors often walked right past him, drawn instead to the noise, to the excitement, to the dogs that demanded attention. And in a place like that, quiet can be mistaken for nothing at all. Because in a noisy place like a shelter, the quiet ones disappear. They don't interrupt. They don't compete. They just wait, hoping someone will notice anyway. Shelter staff. Notice. After a few days, the shelter workers began to notice something unusual. At first, it was easy to miss. The shelter was always busy, always loud. But over time, patterns start to stand out. Every dog barked at some point, even the shy ones, even the nervous ones who stayed in the back at first. Sooner or later, every dog made a sound. But this dog didn't. Day after day, he remained completely silent. No barking, no whining, no growling, not when food arrived, not when other dogs got excited, not when new people walked by his kennel. He would stand, watch, sometimes step forward, but never speak. The staff started paying closer attention. Was he sick? Was something wrong? But he ate normally, he moved normally, he responded to people. There was nothing physically wrong with him, and that's what made it even more unusual. Because this wasn't inability. It wasn't fear in the way they usually saw. It was silence, deliberate, consistent. It was almost as if he had made a decision, never to make noise. A choice that didn't quite make sense, but felt like it came from somewhere deeper. Testing the silence. One afternoon, a volunteer decided to try something different. She had been watching him for days, noticing the way he stayed quiet while everything around him was loud. So instead of walking past, she stopped. She stood in front of his kennel and gently called to him. Soft voice, calm tone. Most dogs would react instantly. Barking, jumping, tails wagging against the metal door. But this dog didn't react the same way. He slowly lifted his head, looked at her, then stood up. No rush. No excitement. He walked forward, one careful step at a time. as if he was thinking about each movement. He reached the front of the kennel and then sat down, right in front of her, still silent. No bark, no whine, just presence. The volunteer waited. Maybe he would make a sound, maybe just a small one, but nothing came. Only quiet eye contact, calm, steady, almost searching. It was as if barking simply wasn't part of his world anymore, as if whatever part of him once made noise had been turned off, not missing, just gone quiet. And that silence felt heavier than any sound in the shelter. The shelter routine. Days passed. One turned into several. Several turned into weeks. And the shelter routine continued, the same way it always does. Morning feeding, metal bowls clinking against kennel doors, dogs barking in anticipation. Afternoon walks, leashes clipping, excited energy filling the hallways. New visitors arriving, footsteps echoing, voices soft, curious, hopeful. Some dogs left, others arrived. The rhythm of the shelter never really changed, but the quiet dog did not change with it. He remained exactly the same, watching, always watching. Following movement with his eyes, noticing every person who passed, waiting, not impatiently, not desperately, just waiting, silent. No matter how loud it got, no matter how much energy surrounded him, it was like he existed in a different space, one where noise didn't belong. The staff began to notice something else too. He never demanded attention, never pushed forward. He didn't try to stand out. He just stayed present, as if hoping that someday someone would notice him without him needing to ask. The first sound. One quiet evening, the shelter softened. A volunteer sat beside his kennel, silent, still. The dog watched from a distance. No pressure, no call, just calm. Slowly, he stood up. Step by step, he moved closer. At the front, he paused, then gently leaned against the door. And then, a tiny, fragile whine. Not just a sound, a beginning, the past revealed. Later, the shelter received information about the dog's previous home. It didn't come all at once, just small details. A short history. A few notes passed along, but it was enough. And suddenly, his silence made sense. His former owner had punished him whenever he barked. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. Every time he made a sound, there were consequences. So the dog learned, not through words, not through explanation, but through experience. Barking led to something bad, again and again, the same pattern, until eventually he made a connection that changed everything. If I stay quiet, nothing bad happens. And over time, the dog had learned something heartbreaking. Silence was safer than being heard. So he adapted. He stopped barking, stopped whining, stopped expressing himself altogether, not because he didn't feel anything, but because he had learned that being heard came with a cost. And when that lesson is repeated enough, it becomes part of who they are, even in a new place, even with new people. The silence stays. Because to him, it wasn't just behavior, it was survival. The patient visitor. Weeks later, a new visitor arrived at the shelter. He didn't rush in, didn't react to the noise the way most people do. He paused at the entrance for a moment, taking it all in. The barking, the movement, the energy. Then he stepped inside. Most visitors are drawn to the loudest dogs first, the ones jumping, barking, demanding attention. But not this time. He walked slowly down the kennel aisle, not distracted, not overwhelmed, just observant. He looked at each dog carefully, not just how they acted, but how they were. Listening, not to the barking, but to what was underneath it. And then, without hesitation, he slowed down, stopped, right in front of the quiet dog. No barking to guide him, no excitement pulling his attention, just stillness, and somehow, that was enough. That was the first real trust. The man crouched beside the kennel, slowly, quietly. No calling, No reaching, just presence. The dog lifted his head and watched. There was no pressure, no urgency, just calm. After a moment, the dog stood up. He stepped forward, then closer. Each movement steady, until he reached the front and gently rested his head against the gate. No fear, no sound, just something deeper. The staff watched in disbelief. They had never seen this before. Sometimes, trust doesn't come loudly. It begins in silence. The new home. That same afternoon, the man adopted him. A quiet choice, but everything changed. The kennel door opened. For the first time, the dog stepped out without hesitation. The shelter noise faded behind him. And ahead, something new waited. In his new home, he moved slowly, careful, observing. Room to room, he explored in silence. Not fear, just habit. But this silence felt different. Soft, calm, safe. No pressure, no noise, just space. And slowly, his body relaxed. His steps softened. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't waiting for something bad. He was finally learning to breathe. The bark. A few weeks later, something changed again. The owner took him to a park, open space, fresh air, no walls, no cages, just freedom. At first, the dog stayed close, watching, staying near the owner's side, still careful, still quiet. But then, the owner picked up a ball, threw it gently across the grass. The dog watched it roll, paused for a moment, and then ran. Not fast at first, but faster with each step, chasing something for the first time without fear. He reached the ball, picked it up, turned back. And in that moment, something shifted. He ran back with more energy, more confidence. The owner smiled, threw the ball again. And this time, as the dog chased it, he barked. Just once. A clear, sudden sound. It stopped the moment in its tracks. The owner froze for a second, then smiled even wider. Because that sound meant everything. It wasn't loud, it wasn't repeated, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, his voice had returned. And this time, there was no reason to silence it. Sometimes the quietest dogs carry the loudest stories. Stories you can't hear right away. Stories hidden behind stillness, behind silence, behind the things they don't do. And sometimes, the dog that doesn't bark isn't calm, isn't distant, isn't uninterested. They're just careful. Careful about what they show, careful about what they express. Because somewhere along the way, they learned that being heard wasn't safe. So they adapted. They became quiet. Not because they had nothing to say, but because silence felt safer than sound. But with time, with patience, with the right kind of understanding, that silence can begin to change. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of safety for everything to shift. Because the dog that doesn't bark hasn't lost their voice. They just haven't learned yet that it's safe to use it. Now I'm curious about something. Have you ever met a dog that completely changed once it felt safe? Tell me your story in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe to Pups et al.